Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, Jennifer Johnson, Avanade's North American Manufacturing Industry Lead, and Thomas Nall, Avanade's Global Manufacturing Industry Lead, share their perspective on what it means to be a modern manufacturer. This episode is sponsored by Avanade, and Jennifer and Tom share stories from the field on how Avanade is helping manufacturers move the needle when it comes to data, technology, and innovation. Okay, well, I am here with Tom Nall and Jen Johnson. Welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I thought we could just start with some introductions for our listeners. Jen, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. So Jen Johnson talking to y'all from Sarasota, Florida today. And my role here at Avanade is our North America manufacturing lead. That means I specialize in business applications for manufacturing-centered companies. So business applications can include ERP, CRM, or digital sales and services, field service, and then also data and analytics, the Power Platform, and modern workplace technologies.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, so my name is Tom Nall. I'm the global manufacturing lead for Avanade. Like Jen, do quite a bit of work with the business applications, but I also work with really the entirety of the Microsoft suite of solutions, and identify how to best deploy those to help our manufacturing clients.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to really get into the conversation here. I know that you position the needs of manufacturers, but in a range of ways, as you were just sort of alluding to. I thought we could really start with some of the basics, because I wanted to talk about data, which, as you often hear, as people often say, is where a lot of the decisions begin and where a lot of the work has to begin. Tom, maybe I'll start with you. Some of the common starting points when you're working with a manufacturing organization in terms of how they should be leveraging data, how they want to be leveraging it. Where do you tend to start the conversation?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and really there's maybe a few starting points, right? And I think that one of the things that we see in companies who really get data right is they do a couple of things. One of those is they have a plan in place, right? And they have a plan in place that allows data to be gathered, to be organized, and then visualized and distributed consistently across the entire organization. So they're not doing things in silos, not doing things in piecemeal. So the first thing we see is, what's your data strategy and what's your data structure look like? And how is that consistent across your organization? Another absolute critical component is, data is all about enabling people to make better decisions, enabling people to make decisions that drive efficiencies in the business. And oftentimes, we make the projects a little too focused on the collection of data, then how are we going to utilize that data? So when you're putting that strategy in place, make sure you have your key users as part of that strategy discussion and design, so that at the end of the day, we're doing what we want to do with a data project anyways, and that's enable our users to take the most advantage of all that data that we're collecting.
Well, Jen, let me ask you to maybe add to that. Are there, from particular, application or requirement perspectives that you hear about, things where you do hear we have this particular use case and we know we're falling short, and you're often looking for solutions in that way?
Yes, and we're seeing that today with all of the supply chain disruption that's impacting manufacturing. So often, manufacturing is completely dependent on what is happening in the supply chain and when products are coming in, and then their ability to deliver to their customers, whether it's another business or a consumer. And the breaks that we're seeing, in supply chain with bringing things into port are impacting the ability for our facilities to manufacture, and then also impacting their ability to deliver to their end customers. But, here in 2021, the concept of a customer just not knowing when their product is going to arrive is completely foreign to us in an age of modern technology. So having that connected ecosystem when I do have a disruption, whether it's a delay or an acceleration upstream in my supply chain, that I can respond and react to that within my manufacturing facility and keep my customer informed, really is completely dependent upon me being a data-driven organization and having all of the different data components and throughout my ecosystem completely connected, so that my buyers are not working, in a bubble that's separate from my manufacturing plant that is separate from my customer service. And that's really where we're seeing manufacturing headed, is it's not a division. It is part of the larger ecosystem, and a term that I still like to use often that's been around for a while, one version of the truth.
And I might just add, Jen, I think that's a great point, right? And especially today, we're seeing there's so much disruption around your supply chain. So, understanding how to build resilience and redundancy into your supply chain is all built on data. So that's a huge topic of conversation and a huge area of interest with manufacturers. But manufacturers across the board are also, supply chain is important, but most of them are looking at similar metrics when they measure their business. They're looking at equipment effectiveness. They're looking at yield. They're looking at supplier performance as part of that supply chain. So, that's always, when you talk about a starting point, we can always say, if you haven't defined an absolute use case or business outcome you want to drive, what are your key measurements? And let's start there and figuring out maybe which ones we want to look at and figure out if we can improve.
Tom, you've mentioned a few of those examples just now, but I know you've also talked about like standardization of data. Does that factor in when you look across the supply chain?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I might, standardization, certainly from an organizational perspective, makes it much more easy to utilize your data, right? So we talked about, can I be as standard as possible in that plan and how I'm gathering, how I'm storing, how I'm utilizing, and then visualizing my information. I don't want to have multiple tools, if I can help it, that my users have to learn, that my IT group has to support. So I think standardization of tools is a core component to being successful with data. Some of the places where I really see standardization becoming more important is in areas like sustainability, right? As sustainable and responsible manufacturing takes on much more critical importance, whether that's being driven by governmental regulation or as a strategic component of what the manufacturer wants to do. It's going to be, if we have standards on what we're going to measure, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to determine the impact on sustainability. So I think that as we look at sustainability, building standardization into the model, the measurement models that we have is going to be critically important to getting those right and improving as much as we need to improve in those areas.
One of the, delivery challenges, you might say, that I've wondered about comes down to, the expertise in an engagement. I'm talking sort of in a project engagement between a team like yours and a client, an organization who has some of these needs, who is working through some of these challenges. Sort of that interplay or the handoff between the expertise that your team brings in to help sort of make sense and build up some of these competencies, build up solutions that can be delivered to this organization, and then how they go and run with it essentially beyond that. Jen, do you have any thoughts on that element of taking on these challenges?
The honest answer I can give you is that it's not easy, and it varies a little bit from company to company. But one of the things here at Avanade we look to focus on is to be standard wherever possible and different where it adds value to the organization. I've been in manufacturing for 25 years, and I recall, sitting in operations meetings where one plant would be reporting on scrap and their scrap rate might be 4%. And then the next plant, it reports their scrap and maybe their scrap is 6%. And then you start what I call the yeah buts, right? The exceptions where they explain why they're different from the other plant, either because they're reporting differently or they're using different technologies, et cetera, et cetera. And it really just starts to reduce the confidence people have in the data they're seeing, and also their confidence to understand which of their facilities are high performing and which ones maybe need some attention or some modifications. So we really take a mindset of what we refer to as a global template, or maybe a company-wide template, where we set out that all facilities will essentially operate the same way unless there's a compelling reason for them to be different. And in manufacturing, sometimes there are compelling reasons. Obviously, manufacturing a chemical is different than slitting a steel coil, is different than assembling a tractor. But there are synergies cross industry, and we really try to amplify those and get organizations not to rely on the way that they've always done things, but think about taking advantage of the synergies that exist across manufacturing, and then really focusing their attention on the differences that will assist them either as a plant or to increase revenue to for their organization and their service to their customers.
And Jason, I think the question also ties back into one of the first questions we talked about, which is empowerment of the end user, right? I mean, if we look at how data has typically been used in manufacturing organizations, IT has controlled the reporting systems, and, business groups have come to IT and said, can you create a report that does XYZ? 2 months later, that report is inaccurate. So they go back to IT and say, can you revise that report? So what we're really driving our customers to do as part of all of our deployments is, empower the users to develop those reports themselves, maintain those reports themselves. So put the power into the user's hands. And our implementations are designed to do that. Certainly teach IT the tools and the security, et cetera, but then enable those users and educate those users so they're not as dependent on IT as they have been in the past to take advantage of the investments they're making and becoming more data driven.
Yeah, I do hear what you're saying there, and it sounds great. Putting on my skeptic's hat, I just imagine, do you ever get pushback on that, on selling that vision to organizations that yes, your workers, your middle managers, other roles can in fact sort of take ownership of some of these skills or some of these duties, and like you said, divide up the responsibilities among the IT organization and the lines of business?
Sorry, I'm chuckling a little bit at the question because it's not do we ever, it's that we always do, right? We get pushback from multiple levels on projects like this because they force an organization to rethink and change quite a bit, and change is uncomfortable. And we're asking everybody to change, right? We're asking IT to give up some of the security and the power they've had in controlling their reports. We're asking end users to learn something new and do something that they haven't done before. They might be asking for more data, but then when you tell them, hey, we're going to empower you to go get it yourselves, that change creates some discomfort. And then there's folks who always think, by making data more relevant, I might lose some value to the company because of the 30 years of experience I bring to the table. So all of these projects have significant change that comes along with it. So embedding a formal change management program that takes all your stakeholders and helps them understand why this is going to benefit them, how it's going to benefit them, and what they can do to help themselves in that process is absolutely critical. And like I said, it's not, does it happen every now and then? It happens on every project. So to ensure that successful change, you really have to have the formal change management component just as part of the implementation project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Tom said, but I would add maybe another angle to that is the shop floor worker, right? So here in North America, we have a shortage of manufacturing employees. We're feeling that everywhere. And we also have, that workforce is aging out. And so we really have to look at how do we grow manufacturing here in North America, in part because of the Biden supply chain initiative and executive order and just the organic growth that we're seeing here in manufacturing as a whole, and replace a workforce that is aging out of the manufacturing community. And, as a mother, of kids in their 20s, I can tell you that having access to data and gamesmanship and things like that is critical to engaging a workforce in that space. And the reason I bring that up is because, when I started my career in manufacturing decades ago, as a shop floor worker, you didn't have a ton of data. I was building stuff to stock and, is the customer happy or unhappy? I don't know. I was measured, against the number of pieces that I was supposed to produce each day. And that was kind of about it. And getting data out into the shop floor so that employees understand the difference they're making, the contribution that they're having, and how that's impacting, their ecosystem is a trend that I think we will see continue to grow when we talk about data transformation for manufacturing. I think that will really start filtering into and being very responsive to what does big data mean, not just to, your management and leadership team to make operational decisions, but to the engagement of your shop floor and your manufacturing community.
Does the use of data and I guess the skills to actually use data. Do you see that as something that is an evolving part of what some of the roles are on the shop floor that maybe hadn't been before? And I mean, to me, that it just sounds like one of those areas where there's a real possibility for, skill growth or for career advancement that perhaps just didn't exist, like you were saying, when there was just a real lack of data.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And I think we see interest in that. The younger workforce, has most of them already have strong computer skills coming into the workforce, and they may have an interest in that or they may not. But just, being able to understand, as a warehouse, picker packer, red light, yellow light, green light on how I'm trending on my picks for the day, things like that. What is our company's net promoter score? How, hey, I switched from wood pallets to recycled composite pallets. What difference did that make to my company in their spend or in their measurement against, the UN sustainability initiatives? Without data reaching the shop floor, I don't know the answer to any of those things. And to be able to do all of those things, whether they're simple or wildly creative, is completely dependent upon having data that's reaching out to the shop floor. So I think the ideation of what information shop floor employees want to see that is informative but not disruptive to their workday, and modeling what that could look like is a great opportunity for people to become engaged. And certainly as I reflect on my career, as I mentioned before, I started on the shop floor and then became interested in supply chain and eventually in technology and consulting. So it's definitely a viable career path. And I'm here to tell anybody that wants to hear about it how to do that.
Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit because I know that you both and your team has done significant work on IoT, and it's an area where I'm always interested to learn what the state of the art is, what the most modern updates are that are coming to that area. Maybe I'll start with you, Tom, on that. When it comes to modernizing IoT, what are you seeing with your clients today?
It's interesting because I think what we're seeing, and I'm almost going to call it like a merging of technologies, right? So IoT is obviously all about connectivity, but then what am I doing with it with things like artificial intelligence and machine learning on top of that? Or what I've seen really, especially recently, is how am I combining IoT and gathering that information on the shop floor with things like digital twins to make, better use of it. And one of the stories that I share pretty frequently, which I thought was just a powerful example of that, is a client is a major food producer, and packaging yield is one of their biggest challenges, and especially providing consistency across that packaging. One package might have two more pieces of candy in it than the next and the next and the next. So being able to collect the data from those machines, model it in a digital twin, allowed them to determine what was causing packaging inconsistencies and drive massive savings across their entire business. So when I think of the trends that we're seeing in data collection and data usage, it's really now that we're, for 5-10 years, we've been telling manufacturers, go collect everything you can, IoT, and they've been doing it, right? And now the next big thing is let's really start leveraging that through things like machine learning, digital twins, et cetera.
Can you talk a little more about what really a digital twin can help with, what you aim for when you're building out a digital twin or an initiative to manage them?
It's a great question, and I'll be a little bit ambiguous in the answer, right? Because it can really be so many different things, and I think that's one of the, digital twin is a hot new technology, and we're asked almost daily from our manufacturing clients, how can I leverage a digital twin? And it could be any number of ways, right? It could be that packaging yield example I gave. It's very powerful in things like predictive maintenance and determining the effectiveness of machines on my shop floor. I can create a supply chain twin to do digital twin analysis on my supply chain that take in what happens if we have another blockage in the port, what happens if there's a hurricane, whatever. So all that supply chain planning. But I think the absolute key is, as we tell our customers too, is let's first of all identify those use cases. What are the biggest either challenges I have as a company or in initiatives I have that I'm trying to achieve that are going to make me successful? let's go look at those and determine, what the best use of a digital twin to help solving those is. And then the other is kind of step back and let's do a real maturity assessment, right? And a capabilities assessment. So everybody loves the videos they see of a digital twin and a hologram or a 3D representation of a factory or a line or whatever it might be. The reality is most manufacturers aren't to that capability yet. So let's identify what your capabilities are from a technology perspective, from an in-house skill set, from a resource investment perspective, and then pick that use case that you're going to get the most bang for the buck for. So I don't know, Jason, does that help answer that question for you?
I think so. I mean, it sounds like it's a concept and a set of technology that can be highly proprietary, highly strategic when used in a way that benefits a company's goals. Yeah.
Perfectly said. Yeah.
Well, I want to also just get your input, each of you, on just other emerging technology that you're really optimistic about, excited about, things you've perhaps already had your hands on that you think has a lot of promise for the future in a broader sense. Jen, do you have any thoughts there?
I do. And I would probably start with remote guides and chatbots, reducing the cost of, along with other technologies like, digital twin and predictive maintenance, reducing the cost of fixed break and bringing technicians into facilities. So if you think of, some of our larger manufacturers, conveyors, auto manufacturers, CNC machine shops, when a machine is down, that is huge revenue that's lost in a very short period of time, right? And historically, there's highly specialized people who know how to come in and repair that equipment, and there's a tremendous cost associated with that. So you're talking about flying potentially a technician in at a high hourly rate. And now with using things like remote guides, that technician can be sitting at a computer in Iowa advising somebody in Tampa of exactly how to fix that machine and being able to see what they see. So not only does it reduce the travel costs, but it also reduces the time to respond to that. And when you layer on top of that things like predictive maintenance and some of those analytics that Tom just mentioned through digital twin, you can A, reduce the number of true break fix incidents that you have, and B, be able to be much more highly responsive to those incidents, whether they're within the four walls of your manufacturing facility, or you can carry that same technology out to the field for fixing your equipment. So say you manufacture industrial equipment that's used on job sites and you provide warranty services, you can use that same technology to reduce your warranty costs, servicing your customers out in the field. It's really neat.
Let me put you on the spot a tiny bit on that one. So the closest thing in the Microsoft ecosystem would probably be like the Dynamics 365 Guides solution, which uses HoloLens and allows you to build out some of the things you've described. Is that solution something that's ready for the field that you've seen in use, or is it going to be a matter of really suiting each business individually? Yeah.
It's ready. And, so remote guides and HoloLens is probably, part of the more advanced side. But when you think about, the ability to use chatbots to work through repairs and things of that nature. And then we also have things like proximity sensors so that, you're not getting too close to the machine to, reduce the number of safety incidents that you might have and auto shutoffs and things like that. So technology is no longer an inhibitor of being able to implement these processes. But as you can well imagine, to circle this back to data, if you're on 17 different platforms and some of them are Excel and Access, your ability to quickly bring up something like a remote guides and HoloLens will be more challenging than if you're entirely in the cloud, have that one version of truth, and have your data kind of all talking to each other already. So it's not really about the technology. It doesn't impact the transformation near as much as, where the organization is in their journey to be, a transformed industry and ready for Industry 4.0. Tom, you're much more well-versed in this area than me. I'd love to have you add some comments.
Well, I will, and I appreciate it, Jen. I think you're spot on. Extended reality and things like from the Microsoft ecosystem, guides and remote assist, whether it's leveraging the HoloLens or even a phone or a tablet, we're doing projects every single day, ranging from getting the right technician to the right place at the right time, to guided inspections of equipment, to remote audits. If I have to do a supplier audit, for example, if I'm in the automotive industry, instead of going on site, doing those remotely. So we're seeing a lot there. I may, and Jason, you may tell me to be quiet, right? But I'm going to kind of circle back to this combination of technologies, and using more technologies than just a single one is where it's really powerful. And I'll tell a quick customer story that I think is an amazing example of this. So at the start of COVID, right, the National Health Service in the UK, they did an analysis and said, we have a massive shortage of ventilators that we're going to need to keep people alive if our predictions on infection rates are right. So we've got about 8,000. We think we need 30,000, but our capacity right now to build them is limited. We can't build anywhere close to 8,000. So they selected a couple of ventilator manufacturers and then issued a challenge, right? And said to the manufacturing community, help us figure out how to build 30,000 of these. And several, fantastic manufacturers stepped up and said, we're glad to help, but, we make jet engine parts or we make car parts. We don't know how to build ventilators. So as part of the project, guides and remote assist were used to create flows on the HoloLens to teach technicians how to build the ventilators. A digital twin was put in place that made a virtual representation of the work cells from the two manufacturers that were selected. The supply chain piece was handled by a massive control tower and dynamic solution to make sure the right parts were coming to the right places at the right time. And within a matter of weeks, there were 3,500 workers who had never built a ventilator before building ventilators, and they made 28,000 ventilators over the course of the 12 weeks of the program. So when you combine these technologies with a business purpose, you can see amazing results. So I think that's a really cool story to share, right? But then as far as, for me, maybe for some specific technologies that I'm excited about, I really like computer vision, especially around things like quality control, right? Using a camera and machine learning and artificial intelligence to take a picture of, one customer it's a weld. Another is there consistency across tiles? So using the intelligence of computer vision to improve my quality, and most importantly, identify quality issues early on in my process before I have to rebuild down the line if I notice it, before it gets out into the field where it's impacting customers. So I really like computer vision. And then another use for it, right, is in inventory control. Inventory is always a challenge for customers. And, we have a client that's using computer vision and drones to count materials in hard to reach places in their warehouse. So that's one of the, I guess, from a pure technology perspective, I really like computer vision and its capabilities, especially around quality and inventory.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and just to go back to the ventilator challenge, I mean, one of the things that makes me think about, and you can tell me if this is on track or not, but in that sort of high urgency, stressful situation, being forced to sort of think of new ways to move through some of those business challenges, does that then, in your view, sort of help guide some of these manufacturers on how they could approach product development or manufacturing processes perhaps in the future from what they came away with sort of proving out in that particularly difficult situation?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And, unfortunately, COVID has been a catalyst, especially for forcing companies to reevaluate, how am I doing things like designing products? How am I doing things like skilling, upskilling, reskilling workers? Again, we've talked a few times about making sure we have the right capabilities at the right place using remote assist. So really, really had a rethink for manufacturers around kind of, say the two most obvious areas are using things like extended reality in the areas I just mentioned. And then Jen talked earlier about, what are we doing to build that resiliency and redundancy into our supply chains? And how am I thinking about supply chains and evaluation of the weaknesses in my supply chains totally differently than I was before?
I wanted to get both of your views on just looking to the future too. I try to work that into most conversations. When you listen to manufacturers today, Jen, do they want to talk about the future? And, one thing that's top of mind, I think maybe just as we're talking now, is Microsoft's push on sustainability. And I mean, that's obviously a broader push, not just them. do companies want to talk about where the world is headed, where the industry is headed, where their businesses are headed beyond sort of the next data project?
They do. And, not to be cute, but sometimes they need the AAA map, right? They need a triptych of how to get there. So they know where they are and they know where they want to be, but they recognize that that's not an overnight change. So what do I tackle first? And when you have so much interoperability, it's not like you can just push one lever and not expect other things to be impacted in some way. So oftentimes when they're really looking to transform how their organization works with data and how they service their customers, as so many manufacturers are, they're really looking for a guidance on how to roadmap that and what to tackle first, what will have the biggest impact, what can they afford, what will be, least disruptive to their shop floor to start. There's always, different things that are going on within the organization that may impact what they want to do first. So, currently I'm working with a manufacturer that, just took a big contract. And as part of that contract, they had some deliverables to their customer that their current systems could not meet. And so we really had to pivot their roadmap in order for them to be able to bring in that contract. So we really work with manufacturing companies to understand where it is they want to go. We also, offer advice on industry trends and where we see the industry going through Avanade and Accenture as well, and then provide a roadmap of how to get there. But I think that, as we've all been in this space for some time, we can't plan too far ahead, right? In my opinion, at this point, for a manufacturer, there's probably not a rock solid 10-year roadmap that's not going to have any modifications to it, right? COVID has taught us that certainly, but just the rate of technological change and the number of competitors that are coming into the market. And then also the way that consumers buy has completely changed, right? Like, I don't think 10 years ago I had bought anything on Amazon. And now I often look at Amazon first. And I definitely know the price that I should be paying for products before I even walk into the store. So all of those behaviors and data points and expectations that have changed over the next 10 years, we have to assume that there will be additional disruptors. We may not know what they are, but we know that there will be additional manufacturing disruptors. So roadmap, yes, but agility to make modifications to that roadmap are also important. Tom, what are your thoughts?
I think you're exactly right, Jen. And we're asked frequently, our manufacturers approach us and their expectation is that we can help them identify what that manufacturer of the future looks like, right? I mean, they're experts at making what they make and servicing what they make or whatever it may be. We work with hundreds of manufacturers every day, so we get a much broader lens to what others are doing in your industry. What are best practices that you may be able to apply? And we're certainly asked for that, very frequently from our customers. And that's actually kind of one of my favorite parts of my job is to have those art of the possible and what's the future look like conversations, and then tailoring them specific to what that manufacturer does. One shift I've seen that's a little different, I think it's not uncommon that we've been asked for, what do we think about, XYZ from an industry best practices perspective, especially solving the biggest challenges that we see right now. One of those is acquiring and upskilling talent, right? That future workforce and how am I going to have the right one? But again, what's a little different is that we're frequently now being asked to take a technology first approach. So how can I leverage digital twin? How can I leverage 5G and blockchain and machine learning and AI? So, and that's okay. Obviously, what we ultimately want to do is solve the business problem with it. But it's okay to start with that technology first lens. And we're being asked to do that much more frequently than we have been in the past, is again, kind of start with the technology and let's map that to our biggest problems and see if we can fix and if not, move on to the next one. And to Jen's point, I think one of the reasons we're being asked that is because there are so many more new entrants. There's so much advancement in technology, whether it's new technologies or increases in the one that we have, that it's virtually impossible for our manufacturers to stay on top of all of that. And that's one of the things of value we can bring to the table is, we can vet those for you. We can understand how they're being applied in industry. and help you think about how to apply those in your specific circumstances.
Yeah, and I can imagine, you see these new capabilities emerging or new offerings, new services emerging and sitting out there in the world. I imagine a lot of people are thinking, I need to get a hold of this. I need to get my arms around it and at least understand what it could be doing for me if it's going to be helping my competitors. How do I get there as quickly as them or faster, right?
Right. And, one of the things that we do here at Avanade that is really, I think, really interesting through our emerging tech group and a group that we have called Avanade Ventures is, we'll go out to the marketplace and look at providers of those new technologies, startups. Who should we be considering working with or introducing to our clients? And again, that we've got the ability and the scale to vet those that our clients just don't. So it exposes us to really new, interesting technology, and we can always stay ahead of the curve. But then it serves a purpose to our customers and letting us, hey, let's do some legwork for you so you don't have to go try and do that on your own.
Yeah, I mean, you see that with strategic investments or acquisitions that firms like Accenture and Avanade have made. And I mean, just tracking, from my perspective, just tracking some of the latest in preview services on the Azure side of things or even AWS and just seeing, the names of them and what they're doing and then having to do a little dive into what does that really mean? And so where did this even come from if it wasn't on my radar yet? I mean, it does change very, very quickly. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for both of you for sharing your perspective here. Yeah, I'd love to stay in touch and sort of see what you work on next. I mean, obviously you have some great customer stories that you've shared, and I'd love to keep paying attention to those too. Anything else you wanted to add or anything else you're looking ahead to sort of as we close out here, Jen?
No, I would just say overall, it's just a wonderful time to be working in manufacturing. I think that manufacturing was a little bit behind other industries in investing in technology and understanding really what big data could mean to them, with the exception of, some of the largest manufacturing companies. So there's just this entire sea change within, what it means to be a modern manufacturer that we're really, in my opinion, just at the beginning of. So from my perspective, it's a great time to work in manufacturing and just super excited to work with clients as they figure out, what does big data and data transformation mean to them and what is the impact that it will have on their organization.
Yeah. And, I love it, Jen, because like Jen, I've been in manufacturing for 25 plus years, right? And I could count on one hand, maybe two, the number of disruptive technologies that have happened in manufacturing and how manufacturers leverage technology in the first 20 years. In the last 5, I've lost count, right? So I love being in this high-paced, high-change environment that we're in today's world for especially for technology and manufacturing. A couple of areas that I'm really interested in is sustainability and responsible manufacturing. The reality is manufacturers have not been looked at as, a leading edge industry and technology in a long time. And I think we've got an opportunity to shine when it comes to truly driving sustainability, eco-friendly ways of manufacturing, responsible, socially conscious manufacturing methods. For one, we've probably contributed more than our fair share to the problems, but I think we've got we've got the collaborative pieces in place. We've got the technologies in place. I think manufacturing can really take be on the leading edge of how we're truly driving sustainability and responsible manufacturing practices moving forward. So I'm excited about that probably more than anything else over the next couple of years.
I agree, Tom. And I think one of the aspects about that is just measuring their success. I think many manufacturers that I've talked to are already making changes that impact sustainability, like sourcing closer to their manufacturing plant, reducing their overall inventory that they're carrying that they hadn't viewed through a lens of sustainability, but really should to be, getting their message out there. Obviously, there's a lot more to be done around sustainability than just reduction in inventory and transportation costs, but those count and they matter. And we need to get that story out there.
All right. Well, Tom, Jen, thank you both so much for joining me today. This has been great.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having it. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. You can connect with Jen and Tom on LinkedIn. And this message from our sponsor. Visit Avanade.com for more information on Avanade, the leading digital innovator, creating great experiences and realizing results for their clients through the power of people and the Microsoft ecosystem. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Please also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for all of our updates. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.